So good evening. It's Rosa Maria Bitetti from IBL talking here, and we have a very rich parterre tonight. So we have Dave Schmitz and Kate Johnson. We're going to be talking about their recent book, which is called Commercial Society, and it's available in English right now, but IBL, Istituto Bruno Leoni, is working for the Italian translation. We have, as you can see, our General Director, Alberto Mingardi, who's going to tell us something about our activities in the field of spreading economic ideas. We have Christian Nesulea from IIS Europe and University of Bucharest, and Pierre Garello, also from IIS, but also ex-Marseille University. And finally, Stefano Damo from University of Bani and Lucca. Since we have so many much more interesting things to say that what I have to say, I will just be very short. I will just recollect that a few weeks ago, I was sitting here having an IBL seminar on financial literacy. We were debating the PISA score results for Italy, and a lot of experts, we were discussing about how financial education is important to live our lives consciously as citizens. But I also think it's something slightly different and even more important to talk about economic education, the ability to understand the basic concepts of economics will make us understand our societies and the choices we are made, we are called to make as citizens. So that's very, very important. I'm very, very happy to discuss this topic. And we're going to start with Kate and Deb, who have basically devoted their life to spreading economic ideas, and they're going to share their experience on teaching these ideas. And it's very interesting because it's a combination of an economist and a philosopher, which nowadays, when most people think of economics as a technical discipline, strikes as a weird couple. But it isn't necessarily so, because after all, economics is a humanistic subject which relates with humans and humans' choices. So I think it's a very nice combination, and I'm sure they're going to share very interesting points with us. So I leave the floor to them.
Okay, well, thank you, and good evening or good morning from our time zone. It's great to see you, Alberto and Rosa Maria. Thank you for hosting this. It's great to see Pierre. I think in 1988, I visited him in Aix while I think the IES was still just an idea at that point. Pierre was, I think, still a graduate student, and I had just graduated, and Pierre made me feel comfortable and at home, and he made for my first visit to Europe, and a memorable, lovely visit it was. Thank you. So great to be back, as it were. And as Rosa Maria was saying, we have spent our lives working on political economy, liberty, economic education, and we've been involved in basically trying to restock the academy and help produce the next generation of college professors. But we've also been realizing that it was, to some degree, that could be too early. We have seen teachers, we have seen math teachers teaching students by adding fractions, by adding the numerators and then adding the denominators, because the students preferred adding fractions that way rather than commensurating the denominators. We have seen economics teachers ask their students how they feel about the minimum wage. And so we have looked at each other and said, we can't just be silent when these people are coming up and becoming, I mean, some of them, half of them don't go to college at all, but the other half are in our freshman classes, and they don't know what concentrating would even be like, let alone understanding the circuitous logic of principles of liberty or of trade, free trade, that sort of thing. So we thought that we have to think about how to vertically integrate education in a place like the state of Arizona, so that what was going on in the universities, the best of what was going on in the universities, could translate into what was going on in high schools as well, because high school populations, it's not just that they're going to be our college students someday, they're going to carry civilization, and it's up to us to do something about it. Okay, so we decided that we had to do something.
Yeah, so it's wide open what we could have done. So we could write a book. A lot of people write lessons. They make videos. Some people just get frustrated and go teach the students directly. But over 10 years ago, we began to teach intense graduate courses to high school teachers because we thought it's not going to work if the human capital isn't in the classroom. So why teachers? It's because if it doesn't matter how good the lessons are or how good the book is, if the teachers don't have the wherewithal to field questions, to be somewhat of an expert on the topic, it just becomes gibberish and the kids tune out. So how do you get to teachers? Well, in the United States, there's 3 ways. We can try to get them pre-career as undergraduates, and that's really hard because the undergraduate curriculum is pretty locked in, and economics is kind of almost a taboo topic.
Yeah, the education college is a whole different college that doesn't have much to do with, say, the business school.
With much to do with disciplines, except ones that are less rigorous in their thinking. So we could start a master's program because teachers are incentivized to get a master's degree. Many of them get master's degrees in education. So it's more of a business model for education colleges. And the other way is to create a course that requires training to teach it. So that's what we did. We created a course that was so hard that the teachers wanted to get training to teach the class because then they got to be a college instructor. So we offered this high school class that was half college and half high school. So it was billed as a hard course, but the teachers to teach it, and we paid them extra to teach it in the high school, then they would get to teach it. So this is just a nice image of what the training looks like. We run them Liberty Fund style. They do all the reading ahead of time. They get the readings a couple months in advance. And this is Jim Otteson teaching a class on Adam Smith. So what we did is we took our idea for a course with Bob Lush and Dave and I, and we workshopped that idea with 14 teachers over 2 weeks. I mean, we holed up in a resort for 2 weeks and went through every single chapter, every idea, and said, can high school kids do this? Are they be interested? And then those teachers took those 70 chapters and adopted parts for their current courses. So, and then they tested that, and then we met back again, and we do this every year with the book, with people who've taught the book, and figured out what works, what didn't work. And overwhelmingly, those teachers left and said, they left that workshop saying, we love this stuff, but it's too hard. It's too hard for the kids. But they came back in November, and we said, you know what, it's July, you're teaching in August, can you just go with it and then come back? They came back in November and said, we were wrong. The kids love being talked to as if they're adults. They love actually getting to use what they learned right away. So we settled on a format of so this is how the book was conceptualized. We decided, I don't know about what happens in Europe, but here most high school textbooks are watered down undergraduate textbooks. The authors give the book to their graduate students and they write it, they water it down, and it becomes kind of very bland by the time it gets to high school. So what we did with Bob Lush is we figured out how to take those concepts, like where did we want to get to with these students? We wanted them to be able to flourish in a commercial society. So what foundational concepts did they have to do, and what axiomatic concepts did we need to get to those concepts, and how we built them up? And it turned out to be 70 topics, but all these chapters are 2 to 4 pages long. They're really short, they're hard. And so what we did is we created a multimedia library. So basically the book just gets them started on the idea. And I have here a link to commercialsociety.net. If you haven't seen it, I'll just show it to you real fast. This is the book's website. So you can see easily all the sections of the book. And for instance, the biggest section is understanding trade, but just these very simple concepts like what is trade, what are resources? They're not land, labor, and capital. It's resources are anything that can be put to use. And once the students get these very basic concepts down, then they use them throughout the book. And so because they keep using the concepts in more and more complex ways, they trust the instructor that the instructor isn't wasting their time. Okay, so anyway, so there's hundreds of things up on this website. They're all interrelated, and new things are updated all the time because the teachers keep telling us. We also have developed a curriculum guide with a test bank, discussions, and lessons. And because of the way the book is parceled, you can use it for many, many purposes. So it works really well with high school seniors. That's what it was designed to be used for. It works with undergraduate freshmen. I pull chapters out of it and use it for PPE courses when I teach. We use it for graduate instruction for high school teachers. New Jersey is starting a teacher certification in personal finance and economics, and they're using this book. And my dean is using it this fall at West Virginia to teach a survey course. So Dave.
So when we submitted this, we at some point we were getting criticism for our packet of textbook course materials not having been properly refereed or published, and we looked at these people and said, like, don't you know what a book is? Don't you know what a course packet is? But then we thought, well, yeah, actually it is a book, so let's publish it as a book. So we talked to Rowman and Littlefield, they're in this area, and they have a track record of producing books that they can sell for 35 pounds or so. And when we asked them if that could be a cap, and they said, oh, we can beat that price, we'll make $35. So it's an inexpensive book. We are in charge of the electronic library, so that's all on us. And Kate and we have a staff that works with the high school teachers. So there's a constant, there's a constant gale of creative destruction and replacement and replenishment. So those resources are always developing, and both the teachers and the students are welcome to contribute. But these are the reviews that Rowman and Littlefield got back when they submitted it to reviewers for comment, and it was interesting. It struck us that we kind of knew what we were doing, but the reviewers really knew what we were doing. So the point was not to give students the tools that they would need to major in economics. The point was to talk to them about succeeding as an adult, as a financially and morally responsible adult. So there are lessons in there where the subject of the lesson is to say, okay, so here's an example of how a life can go wrong. There was this person who was one of the top basketball prospects in the country. He He was about to get out of college and become a top National Basketball Association pick. And his initial rookie contract would have been for millions of dollars. And then he took $20,000 as a bribe for shaving points, for scoring, for missing some free throws. And he ended up in jail. And so he writes now, he says, this is not like some challenge, but some trade-off between being moral and being rational. There was nothing rational about what I did. So it's not the real morality and real rationality. They meet at the point where the question is, what kind of a person do you want to be, and what kind of a life do you want to live? And so our reviewers picked up on this, and they talked about how the book centers on dignity and integrity, and how success in the marketplace depends upon the way our friend Bob Lush used to put it, is he said, and he was the most cited figure in marketing, the most well-regarded marketing theorist there is. He's passed away now, but he used to say things like, every marketing decision is a moral decision. You've got to ask yourself whether the truth is good enough to sell your product. And if it isn't, you need to get the message being that if the truth isn't selling your product, you need a better product. And we have another dear friend, Dan Dollywall, who was the head of accounting, also passed away, I'm afraid, but we would meet him for coffee on Saturday morning, and he would listen to Bob, and he would say, you know, accounting is the same way. Accounting isn't just about telling the truth. It's about figuring out what truth has to be told so that the client isn't misled about the health of the business. So all of that was just to try to say, we want to teach economics not as a thing to memorize for the test, but as a thing to guide you through life.
Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, I think
No.
that's on you. But here are some of the courses that we've run, and these are some of these courses were designed by Kate. Some were designed by me. Some we designed in collaboration with people like Larry White and Jim Mottison and Charlie Holt. But yeah, a lot of this is either this is Kate's program or it is a descendant of Kate's program. This is the kind of package that she wanted to make available for the high school teachers, and they love it.
Well, so the reason we did this is because the ethical marketplace is the first course, and that uses the book. But then the teachers want to come back for more, and we want them to keep coming back for more. So any of these other classes they can take with that foundation of Dave's class. And that way they come back, they're in tune, they keep bringing us more teachers, and it becomes a cohort. And they, 10 years running, and when you design a new class, you design it with the mind that these people are putting together all these pieces. And we have teachers who come back and tell us, I was quoting Adam Smith to my students. Like, how many high school teachers quote Adam Smith to their students? It's pretty phenomenal. And so Dave and Sarah have turned those courses into this new master's program. So we finally got the dream package, which is a master's for the high school teachers. And this is suitable for journalists. What we didn't know when we started this is the impact it would have. We have 5 state legislators who have signed up for the master's in law and economics. That is like thrilling, right? I mean, you can imagine the impact of a highly educated teacher in the classroom, right? But can you imagine, a better educated legislator, policymaker? They'll start speaking a higher language, I hope, and come to better decisions.
The 2 main parties are the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party is supposed to be the left-wing party. We've been criticized by people who never read the book for being right-wing. The assumption is just that we're right-wing. Well, of those 5 legislators, 4 of them are from the Democratic Party, and one of them came up to me at an event, and he said, "So what's right-wing about this?" And I said, I have no interest in ideology. What what I'm interested in is the possibility of making your community a better place for the people around you, and flourishing by making your world better. And he said, okay, well, that's not right wing, that's not even Republican, that's just human. And so he said, I'm in, sign me up, I want to help however I can. And now he's one of our students. So that's the kind of feedback we've had. Not all good, but mostly really good.
It's good and exciting and quite unbelieving for our political scene to imagine a legislator sitting and taking classes and wanting to train. But still, nonetheless, I think we can extend, if any of our legislators is here and they want to get more education and they want to know more about the master, or even if we have teachers who might be interested in this option, they can definitely contact us and we will put them in contact with you.
Thank you.
And now I'm switching to Pierre. Pierre also has devoted a lot of his life to both teaching professionally at the university and through running the IES. For those of you, and I think there is few young people in Europe who don't, IES is the Institute of European Studies that allows young people and not so young people to attend summer seminars and meet other like-minded people and get an education with teachers coming from all over the world. And Pierre has been teaching there. He also teaches at the International Master in European Law and Economics and to as many international events I can imagine. I often find Pierre there. So do you want to share something about your insight, your experience about spreading these ideas, economic education?
Sure. First, let me say I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to see Kate and Dave. And I'm on holiday, but I bring some good readings with me, as you can see. So let me first. I don't want to waste too much time. And I just thought about that listening to Dave and Kate about. Because one of the focuses on high school students, of course, I'm a university professor. I didn't get much a chance to talk to high school students, but I did the program a few years ago, and the thing is still feasible. That I think will change the landscape in France. So I'm talking here about France. Now, in France, of course, everything is centralized. You know France. France is a country of centralization. So any high school has to follow a program, which is shaped by the state. They tell you what you should, what is on the program this year, what you should learn and everything. And teachers are supposed to use books that have the habilitation, so to speak, from the ministry, okay? Now, teachers, in order to prepare their class, they like to have materials, videos and things to read. And the leftists have understood that very well. So let me share my screen just a few seconds and see if it works. Will it work? What do I want to share? Here it is. So can you see the screen?
We can see.
So they have created this association, Alternative Economic, and they were very smart. So on their website, they posted all kinds of material, which is very useful for the teachers. So they just go there, and of course they know about the program. So they have the program of the state, and then and so of course that's easy. Professors can show all this. They also have a magazine that. Some students that want to be sure they will be successful and get the diplomas, they will buy the magazine. So this was, a channel for leftist ideas in France for the last 30 years. Now, my project was IES, but unfortunately, I was not able to raise the money. We'll have to have a competing website. One designed exactly with the same purpose, taking all the points that the teacher are supposed to deal with throughout the years and put our material there with videos, with, all kinds of things, short notice and so on and so forth. Okay, so let me stop. If you want to have a look, go to Alternative Economic. And actually now, after they've been doing that for like 40 years now, or 30 years. I mean, the very beginning of the internet. So now people go on that website, even though they are not high school teachers, even though, because of course they've learned how to communicate in some kind of easy way with a large audience. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to share. And now what I had prepared, and let me go through it very quickly, it is in fact a little bit of the kind of thing I've learned trying to, to teach economics and, as you say, the philosophy of freedom throughout, the last 30 years or so. And in fact, you'll see those points is very close to what I took was your main point, Kate and Dave, which is you have to talk to them as you talk to adults, not to kids, not some people to whom you just want to convey the truth, you want really to address them in a very personal way. Now, here are my points, and Rosa Maria, stop me if I'm too long, but I think I can make it in 3 or 4 minutes. The first thing I've learned throughout the years is that you cannot talk, you cannot teach anything unless you know who you are talking to. I'm totally unable to prepare a conference, to prepare a talk if I don't know who will be in the audience. Okay, you don't teach the same way. I teach in Egypt at the University of Cairo. I teach at the law school. I teach at the economic department. I teach in some IS seminars. And each time I think we need to adjust to whoever we're talking to. Okay, so I think if our goal is to convey ideas, the one size fits all probably is, is maybe, of course, we have to have some guidance, but then I think this is very important. So that was my point number one. My point number two is what I call the closed doors phenomena. I think all of us, and this is not only true of the people to whom try to convey ideas, we have closed doors. We are ideas we don't want to explore because we believe there is nothing interesting, beyond that door, and that's why a lot of people pay no attention to the possibility of a free society, whether, entrepreneurship will get, because they have some cliche, received ideas. And so identifying those closed doors in the mind of the people you are talking to, I think is essential. I don't know, for instance, just to give you something which is really typical if you try to talk or to teach in France, let's assume you start to say, well, it's, and at the time of the coronavirus crisis, you might say, it would be interesting to build market and entrepreneurship into the healthcare ecosystem. If you want good solution, new solution, more rational solutions, and then people in France immediately they would say, oh, so that people would die in the street like in the US, and the hospital will be closed, and so on and so forth. So those closed doors are usually bad history, things that they were told at some point and then never questions, and that's it. So you won't convey anything to them unless you identify, where those those bottlenecks are. Other examples are, of course, the New Deal got us out of the recession. So that's the proof that the state, but a lot of people, that's it. And how many times, even among, not only high school students, even among my friends, who are lawyers, or who are doctors, or the Marshall Plan in Europe. People will tell you, well, the Marshall Plan is the obvious example that, okay, so that's something I think which is important. Now, another thing which I think is important, and maybe I think it's probably good to tell the people, they are adults, as you say. Among the things we try to convey, some of them are very intuitive. The fact that people react to incentives, the stick and carrots, that they can understand. You can easily build examples from their own life where, you know, they react to incentive given to them. And it's important because that, of course, is an important element of the overall understanding of society. But there are things that are counterintuitive. And for us, of course, one of the most counterintuitive thing is the idea of a spontaneous order. Is the idea that something can work better if you accept to lose control over that thing. Now, I know now each time I introduce this, which I think is really a key idea, so you have at some point, you know, I start by saying, you know, I agree with you. This is counterintuitive, that things can work okay without a boss, you know, without an organization. So this is also, I think, another important point. I think maybe 2 or 3 more points, but I think, and I guess this is very close to your approach as well, Kate and Dave. I think it's very important, and maybe because you know, I was a student of Kirchner, but to keep the difference between the is and the outs, and to get them learn to make that distinction. Okay, you might believe that, I don't know, profit is bad, that redistribution is good. That's fine, okay, but before you make such normative statement, I mean, maybe you don't want to use the word normative, but this, you know, moral judgment or whatever, you must understand how the market works, or public decision works, and so on and so forth. So, you know, to keep that distinction and to make them aware of the distinction, okay? And so that we don't confuse everything about understanding the working of things and then putting on top of that our own moral judgment, which is fine, but we should rely on a good understanding. Let me drop that one. Let me drop that one as well. Maybe also something which I think, unfortunately, too many of my colleagues do, is that when we try to convey of our ideas, we try to ridicule, you know, the student who don't understand, or something similar, we ridicule the people they like, you know. If you appreciate this Swedish girl, you cannot be a smart guy, you know, because that Swedish girl, I won't name her, but she's obviously damn stupid, you know. Now, I think this is very counterproductive, you know, to destroy their hero, and to ridicule them. I think, you know, many students, they feel they need quite the contrary. My feeling is that they are often scared, and they have little self-confidence, and it's not by destroying the thing right now where they can, you know, the things they rely on at that point, that you will get any, you know, you will make any progress. I mean, I could talk more, but I think we should discuss. I think all of that, you know, I've read most of your book and I listened to your talk. I think it's very close to the kind of thing you are trying to do. I think in my experience, tends to confirm what you were saying earlier. And I'll stop here.
Thank you so much.
Wow, Pierre, thank you for impressing us with a Frenchman keeping his time and with all your amazing insights. I will leave now the word to Christian, who also works with IES. He's from Romania. He also has a lot of new ideas and brilliant experiences, let's say it this way, let's put it this way, in his vocation to share economic ideas with the people. Please.
Okay, thank you, Rosa Maria. Thank you, everyone. It's really good to meet you, Kate and Dave. For me, it's the first time I see you, even if it's not in person. I apologize once again for my voice. Somehow it's going away today. I'm sounding a bit more like Lemmy from Motorhead, so you know, that might work well with some people.
You wish.
I wish, yeah. So the presentation I want to give very quickly will focus on two things. One is the fact that, in fact, at IES, we have had some experience with high school students as well. So we have had at least 2 seminars that I know of where we mixed high school, homeschool debate students from the United States with high school students from Romania. I know of these because I was the one running these 2 programs alongside Greg Remke, who's an old-time friend of IES as well. We learned many very interesting things by doing these programs. One was that obviously homeschool students from the United States who get a lot of investment in their education by their parents do significantly better than high school students from Romania, even though they also get a lot of investment from their parents in their education. To explain that, recently a representative of the Ministry of Education in Romania publicly stated that if you only go to the state school and only get the state education, you might get a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 on the baccalaureate, on the graduation exam at the end of the high school. So basically, if you want to reach 10 out of 10, your parents need to pay out money to get you private tutoring, because the public school is not designed to get you that. You know, the public school is designed to get you to pass. I could go on and complain a lot about the things that are not as they should be in the public education system in Romania, but I'm going to try and keep this part just very, very short so I can tell you the good things as well. The main problem here that, you know, as far as I know from Pierre, is somewhat similar in France as well, is that we don't even get teachers who have a background in economics, teaching economics in high schools. So very often in many places in Europe, actually, it's graduates of psychology or sociology who end up teaching economics, because economics is actually bundled with a bunch of other social sciences. You know, it's not math, it's not, you know, the Romanian language or history or any of the important things. So it's just filed under other. So, you know, they just look for a guy who's willing to do this, who's willing to teach this. And then sometimes they have absolutely no idea what they should do for the economics class. And, you know, this has been confirmed as here in Romania, at least. I've been working on a project to create educational resources for high school students and high school teachers for the past 6 years. So we have a bunch of videos out already that are centered more on the public policy side of things. So they were designed to be more general economic education, not specifically done for high school students. We wanted to try and see what the effect of videos of this sort would be for the masses, let's say. We have a few videos that have over 20,000 views on Facebook and on YouTube where they were posted. We don't have a very large number of them out yet, because we are trying to get, how shall I say this nicely, to get the benediction of the Ministry of Education for the rest of our materials so that they might be used in the schools. So we're still sitting on a bunch of videos that are designed to follow the mainstream economics curriculum for high schools. And we are going to release them this September, come what may, because we've been waiting for confirmation that they can be used in schools for a long time. And it's taking much longer than we thought. And I think we will eventually just release them into the wild and let students use them, you know, like bootleg copies of The Wealth of Nations or something, circulating in the schools without permission from the higher ups. Not that The Wealth of Nations is not allowed in Romanian schools, don't get me wrong. That is one book that is allowed in Romanian high schools, alongside with, you know, Das Kapital and all the other fundamental books of economics. What we have learned in these 6 years, which is something that I'd like to contribute to the discussion, is that there are some things that work much better with today's youth than others. We did quite an extensive study at the beginning of this year to see what economics resources work best based on what is happening in other places. And what we found is that for the European scene, the really important thing is that we have economics videos in the native language of the people we are targeting. So in the United States and in the English-speaking world, there may be lots and lots of resources. In Eastern Europe, there may be lots of people who speak English very well, even young people. I know it's not necessarily the case in Italy, but over here, a lot of young people do speak English very, very well. Still, we had way more success with short videos that were in Romanian than we managed to have with any of the ones that were in English, even if they had subtitles. So the important thing here is, if you want to reach the 500 million or so audience in the European Union, you need to go and translate the stuff, and not just translate it, but create videos that are specific to the national countries, to the specific languages. The other things that we discovered were that talking head videos with animation work best, which is very interesting, but they are also quite expensive to make compared to the other alternatives that we were looking at. Specifically, we discovered that while Khan Academy style videos were revolutionary, the time Khan Academy started doing this, they are among the least effective ways to explain things. So, just drawing things on an iPad and having that recorded is not a very successful way to deliver information. We looked at a number of things. We even looked at whether or not there was any correlation between whether we created a resource was created that was for economics in particular, or if it was a multi-subject resource. So, there are all of these websites where you can get materials that will cover history, geography, economics, maths, and other things. It does seem that creating specific resources on a particular topic that people can access where they do focus on that topic is the best way to do it, which is, again, something that I think is very much in line with what you've been doing with the Commercial Society, because this is a book and the website that are dedicated to economics and the ethics of doing business and all those things that are connected somehow. So this is the direction we want to take going forward with the project to develop these high school economics teaching resources in Romania. We've been a little more successful in Romania than Pierre has been in France in securing funding to do this project. I'm not going to say how much more, because it's actually embarrassing how little money we managed to raise so far. But we did manage to push far enough to actually be quite hopeful that we will have a reasonably complete resource coming out this year, finally, after 6 years. I'm going to stop so I can amaze you by the fact that the Romanians stuck to the agreed time as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian. It's very interesting. Thanks for sharing your research and your insights. Maybe you can also share in the group chat the link of one of your videos so we can have an idea. But I think it's definitely interesting that we are all moving forward, building some both virtual and physical and tech, online and physical material. Now I'll switch to Alberto. And I don't know if you can go further. We do a lot for economic education. Our program, IBL delle Scuole, is much more analogic, much less 2.0 than the one that we've been considering before. But you maybe want to talk about it a little bit more and tell about how we are switching to the digital world right now and whatever you think it's relevant for enriching this discussion.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be in this webinar, and I'm particularly very happy that Kate and Dave's wonderful book is going to be available in Italian soon, by and large thanks to the work of our contemporary libertarian version of Sydney and Beatrice Webb, who are both working on the translation these days. I would like to preface my comments that are going to be just a couple of slides and what we do in with EBL and nelle scuole, just by pointing out a couple of things. First of all, this digital switch is, alas, a necessity because of COVID-19. I mean, when it comes to Italian schools, I mean, nobody actually knows if they will ever open again. Well, I'm joking, but not so much. So we needed to switch. If we can move to the next slide, and so that would be nice. Basically, because of the situation in which we are. But the second thing, I believe that this sort of program is going to be even more needed in the world that we're going to be living in after the pandemic. Because like it or not, government action and government aid is going to be far more pervasive than it was, even in France or Italy. And actually, the picture that everybody is getting out of the pandemic, and particularly young people, is a vision of the world in which all uncertainty and risks can be managed only thanks to massive government action. So what we do in school has always been, I would say, not so much about teaching economics, but about trying to give some key concepts. And these key concepts, I used to say, one of them was opportunity cost. If kids got what opportunity cost is, we will have a very different reflection over economic matter. And the second thing is how a market works. So why the market is not necessarily a totally anti-ethical place, as most teachers still believe. Why actually we need a market society in order to have a pluralistic society. So these are just a few numbers of the last couple of years. So, you know, in the last school year, with COVID-19, we had 26 lectures in school and 17 different schools meeting personally, 1,435 students, and then 3 online lectures afterwards. The program was born as a series of lectures provided free of charge by IBL to high schools that asked for them directly. These meant most of high schools in the north of the country, in Piedmont and Lombardy, some of them in the deep south, particularly in Campania. Numbers were actually far higher a couple of years ago because the number of schools we can reach depend by and large on local partners, on people inviting us or chaperoning us into particular environment. What's the plus of the analogic approach? The plus of the analogic approach is sticking in the mind of children, particularly kids, but I would say, particularly in some areas that are not particularly well developed, as somebody who made the effort to get there and to bring a testimony and material and donate books to the library and all of that. But of course, what we needed to do was trying to develop instruments to reach out to teachers, which is exactly what we're going to be doing with Dave and Kate's book. So we catered some teaching modules and organized seminars for teachers on issues like what is, or better say perhaps what was, globalization, agriculture and innovation. It's a very interesting subject. How can we feed a planet of 8 billion people? How is technology impacting positively on our ability to feed a growing population? And then books like Homer Economicus, which is actually not a simple book. It's not a book for kids. It's an economics book that basically uses the Simpsons episode in order to provide teachers with nice examples they can use in class. And we gave away a copy of this book to any and each of all the teachers in economics in the Italian quote-unquote economic high school. There is such thing in Italy, even though economics is not really at the center of the curriculum, believe it or not. The last project we started is on unintended consequences in the sense of perverse effect. It's made of a book which is called What Really Happens If, and tries, to build upon a very simple notion, which is, whenever you got some sort of policies that are marketed as having wonderful effects, at the very same time, you may have some perverse effects. So, when you're thinking about saving jobs in the face of innovation, or having tariffs in order to protect national producer, what you're actually having is, a situation in which you're going to be having some losers anyway at the end, and society is not going to be benefiting as those who made those policy proposals believe. So this is a video which was made out of this comic book series. This is a politician guy speaking. And what happens in almost all the videos is that whatever the policy proposal the guy is advancing, realizing it basically implies multiplying guys like him. So growing political intermediation and putting more bureaucrats in charge. How these ideas are received by high school teachers. Well, high school teachers are extremely poorly paid people in Italy who were raised in a context in which the dominant ideology was a very different one. So even bringing them in a context in which they accept the possibility of an open discussion over economic matter is a challenge. But it is, in my view, a most necessary challenge if we want a free society to endure in the future. I think I'm done, and I leave it up to Rosa Maria and Stefano.
Okay, thanks, Alberto. As part of the team of people who go to schools and try and talk with children, let me just share how amazing it is to see that sometimes people never had any contact at all with economics and think about it as something very abstract, numerical, mathematical, suddenly see that it becomes relevant to their lives. And yes, Alberto is right. We often see more challenges from teachers than from students to our speech, but it's always nice to have an open conversation with all of them. And speaking of this, Stefano is not an economist, but he studies something extremely fascinating, I think, which is how economics ideas spread into society through non-economics and non-technical textbooks. So he studies books, he studies, novels and movies and TV shows, and see how these all contribute to creating cultural ideas about economics and trades. So I wanted to have, and he also works in a very different country. He teaches in Bosnia. And he also lives in a different environment to the one that we are all experiencing. So I wanted to know what he has to share, what he will recommend to all of us who are engaged into sharing these kind of ideas, and maybe share some insights about his own experiences in Bosnia.
Thank you, Rosa Maria. Thank you for having me here. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak with the authors of Commercial Society, one of whom, Dave, I actually see again after many years, after having attended his lectures at an event that is very dear to me. It was an IHS social change workshop that occurred in 2005. And that I still remember with great affection. It was a feast of ideas. What I would like to share with you in these 10 minutes is a few of the obstacles that one may encounter in the among the literati or the non-economic intellectuals when it comes to understanding, accepting the fundamentals of what we call commercial society. And regarding my work in Bosnia, I think there is among the attendees, and I ask Enzo perhaps to contact him, the person who in Bosnia is taking care of a Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian translation of the book, which I'm hoping to see soon in bookstores. That is Professor Admir Cavalic, who has just joined us. When I speak in conferences, in conferences of literary studies about books that address economic matters or the theme of work or industrial themes, what I find is that there is a difficulty in communicating that starts from the meaning we give to words. Commercial society or market economy or capitalism most often are construed in a very different way from the way these terms are construed in economics departments. For example, a literary scholar would immediately think, first of all, of a historiographic category. So capitalism is that place in the history of the world, that period in the history of the world that occurs more or less between the end of the 17th century and nowadays, even though nowadays we may already be in a post-capitalist era. So historiography, shorthand for exploitation. Commercial society, capitalism is that thing that adulterates the fact that some people, mostly men and mostly white, exploit other people, mostly non-men, mostly non-white, and institutionalized class division. So contrary to what the early thinkers that inspired modern capitalism had in mind, actually capitalism is often perceived as a system that, as a reactionary system, a system that tends to preserve the status quo. Now, where does all this come from? Obviously, it is not just imagined. It comes from an interpretation of history and also an interpretation of facts of the present reality in light of certain texts, in light of a certain episteme. So how can one try to overcome these obstacles and have a productive conversation on these topics? Well, I've heard already many excellent activities that are being carried out, and obviously Commercial Society, I think, is going to be a landmark in this direction as a book that teaches economics with such a different approach from most textbooks out there. Perhaps one could add courses or lessons in which the idea is to reframe facts of the real world that are usually interpreted in a received way. For example, take a financial scandal. Financial scandals are often interpreted as the effect of bad intentions on the part of the actors involved. Start reframing what happened in terms of distorted incentives provided by actors that did not appear on the scene of the scandal. And this might help people start to see things in a more economic way, in the sense of Bastiat's what is seen and what is not seen. Understand that behind everything that happens in the economic sphere, what is seen is not the whole story, but one should also take into consideration what is not seen. While you were talking, I've taken some notes that I would like to refer to. For example, understanding the counterintuitive concepts that are commonplace in economics, such as spontaneous order. Well, we could look at history for that. History is full of counterintuitive ideas, very unpopular ideas that ended up becoming commonplace. Take credit. How did credit come to be accepted? In 16th century England, credit was not even a word available. The only one was usury, to indicate the acts that we now call loans and credit. It took centuries, but eventually it has become a commonplace, perhaps even pushed too far in our days. Fiat money. How did humanity came to accept to use pieces of paper instead of goods like gold to use as money? International trade and the balance of trade. There are very interesting discussions that have taken place in the past centuries concerning the benefits of balanced trade, of international trade for countries. And by reconstructing that debate, perhaps retrospectively, by reverse engineering the arguments, we can find ideas on how to make today's unacceptable concepts, counterintuitive concepts, more palatable, such as what I was talking about before, distorted incentives, or the unintended consequences of benevolent action, especially on the part of the public actor, or again, spontaneous order, which many people even confuse with the Smithian metaphor of the invisible hand, and don't even imagine that it is another thing altogether, an additional idea. Since time is not friendly, I would leave it to Admir Cavalic to take the word and talk to us about economic education in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and perhaps also the state of the translation and publication of commercial society.
Thank you, Stefano. Yeah, sure. Indeed, thank you, Stefano, for putting us in touch with Admir, with Professor Cavalic, who is a pioneer of ideas, economic free market ideas in Bosnia, which I'm quite suspicious was not a very friendly environment when he started spreading this idea. So I will be very happy.
Still not is, actually.
Yeah. Well, so what's the situation? What are you doing? What do you think is most interesting? And how do you think this book, if you think this book is going to help us reach more hearts and minds of people?
Thank you, everyone. It's really an honor to listen to all of you, and especially to the authors of Commercial Society. Thank you, Stefano, for inviting me to speak here. Just to give you the state of libertarianism or liberal economics in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm officially the oldest liberal economist in my country. So I'm the first generation who back 15 years ago, I read Milton Friedman, and that changed my life and so on. And I started firstly promoting that, and then teaching at faculty and promoting with our NGO. Regarding the textbooks about economics and so on, we have lots of experience. We did that for 10 years. We have a project called Catalaxy. So that's like seminars, 3-hour seminars that we go throughout the country, voluntary, couple of economics fellows, and we teach especially high school students. From our experience, we know, we have a saying, it's called bug in the ear, meaning that if you plant or seed some ideas in someone when he is really young, we know from experience that eventually you will change their perspective. So right now we enjoy the fruits of our labor, meaning that once someone hears about the concept, which is, I'm really happy that they are covered in commercial society, especially the key concept, meaning the concept of value creation, the resources, and so on. If you hear and understand those concepts, even in a period of 1 hour and so on, eventually they will stick in your ear, in your mind, and you probably will not go all the way, meaning you will be socialist and so on. I'm referring there to Hayek, like if socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists at all. So our experience tells us that, and we do that, that you just need to expose the audience to certain economical concepts and so on, and eventually they will get it, like they will understand it, and it's really hard for them to move from that, to forget all that and go to left wing and so on, and eventually be against that. So from our experiences, lots of young politicians right now, lots of public opinion guys, lots of media people, they all right now have a step forward in understanding economics and being closer to liberal agenda, liberal in European sense, of course, like classical liberal and so on. For Bosnia, it was quite challenging because our textbooks, we did analysis of our high school textbooks. They are teaching Marxist economics still, because those professors are still alive from former Yugoslavia. And usually, like in Romania and other countries, there's no much effort given to write a good textbook for high school students. That's why we saw those population as our focus population to do some work. And because eventually when they reach college, faculties, universities, I think it's too late. Because they have their mind set up, they usually choose a side and so on, and it's really hard to change minds of students, but it's really easy to plant seed ideas in high school minds. So that's what we do, and we hope with this book. I especially liked it. I read it. I keep it in the pocket because I'm usually commenting on the local media, the economical topics, and I really like it because I use it I don't read it like as a whole, but I use one segment, like I saw it, and I like to read something about that, so I can give statement on some issue that I'm not so much familiar. As a professor of economics, you cannot know every segment of economics. And of course, I like the practical implication of this book, personal financing. That's really practical. We all know that all the liberal ideas are practical in some way if you want to understand the world, if you want to succeed in this world. But this part is especially practical when someone opens it and wants to read something that he can immediately implement in his life. Lots of people don't understand accounting, marketing, the concepts and so on, and I think it will be useful for them. So when we get this done, we will have it in as Stefano said, in one language, but actually it's 3 or 4 language, like in Balkan sense, because Serbian, Croatian, Montenegrin, Bosnian, and a bit of Slovenian, we can understand each other. So if we translate it in one language, that's like you get 4 or 5 languages, like audience that can understand it. That's from me. Thank you, guys. Happy to participate here and listen to you all.
Okay, thank you. So we have a comment more than a question in the Q&A, which is from Claudio, who said there is such an immense need for this in the world, in the Western world, paradoxically, specifically, and even more so in Italy. So they thank us for the job. I don't know if Italy is worse than the others. It seems that pretty much every country faces their own challenges. So, and somebody else is also telling that sociology textbooks teach Marxist economics as well. Yes, I'm technically under a sociology faculty, and if in economics, at least it's, I will say that individualism as a methodology, as the main methodology to assess phenomenon. It's much less so in other humanities, where Marxism is still a very important interpretative keys to understand reality, as Stefano was pointing up. And since we don't I don't know if we have actual real question, but I will leave the floor if somebody else wants to do that. It has been really great to be together. And but what I think is, now that we're all told what we are doing, maybe my next question for you, what can we do together? How do you think we can integrate our individual efforts? For instance, what Pierre was saying, building a portal comparable to the one of the leftists in France. Is it something that we can share and build a pan-European? Can we do in-class events coordinated like the one IBL is doing? Can we do videos in other languages than Romanian? So a quick round, I will keep the same order or whatever order you will prepare on what we can do together. So Dave.
Okay, thank you, Rosa Maria. So I think one thing, Pierre said it well, I think Admir, forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly, you hit on it too, but one thing I tell my graduate students, like basic principles of teaching, one thing I say is never win. Like winning is poison. Like if your students come up with a point, I mean, sometimes the best thing you can say is, you've got a point, think about it some more, and there's something right in what you're saying. And then they'll come back and they will have convinced themselves of some way of understanding that is far more liberal than you would have thought it would be. And it's way more liberal than it would have been if you had argued with them and told them what they had to believe. If you let them make up their own minds, they're practicing freedom and good things come from that. So that's one thing. I also like very much the idea, I mean, you would know better than me, but the idea of having the videos appear in a viewer's native language. I mean, we're so language challenged here. We have so little exposure to other languages, even other accents, but it does make a difference. I mean, I think people are accustomed to reading subtitles now, but still, to feel like it came from your own culture, it's important. Go ahead.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I add? So, one project that Dave and I are working on is we're working with ICP in Colombia, and they are creating videos to go along with the textbook they're designed to be in Spanish, but the animator, so they're animated short videos and they're only 2 minutes long, but they're doing them in such a way that they can be translated into any language. So that, so there's thought bubbles, but the thought bubbles are in figures instead of words. So there's no words that appear in the video, so that and all we have now are storyboards, but we meet with them and go through the script, and it's really hard work to get a 2-minute video on emergent order and zero-sum games. Like, so they're picking and I think we're calling the series something like Heard on the Street. So it's for young people, and it's immersed in with people, like basically it's a corner grocery store is where all the conversations happen. So it's really kind of warm and fuzzy but each one we have to think of the myth that we're trying to bust, or the myth that we're trying to enlighten, but we leave it so that nobody feels bruised at the end. So I think it's going to be a fun project. The other thing I wanted to say about language is the website that we set up, commercialsociety.net. It's just, it's for this book, but it is an easy place. And once teachers get exposed to it, they go to it, and we set it up so it can be any language. We flipped, so all the materials. So for instance, a lot of the videos we have Spanish versions already. and Chinese versions. So the user, if we just open it up, so we could set it up for Italian, and all the resources will show up that we have in Italian for those pockets. And so it's not a hard thing to catalog and to just have that available. And if it's not available, then the subtitle version comes up. So at least the materials it's ready-made to be adopted into different languages. I don't know if I made sense with that, but the website already has that architecture set up for it.
Okay, great. Anybody else on this point on what we can do together?
I could just add about the languages. So with the Colombians, we're dealing with script writers and people who kind of understand voices on the street, and they will say so we'll go back and forth, we'll argue about this, and they'll say, you can't sound like a philosopher when you say this, you can't sound like an economist when you say this, it's got to be authentic dialogue on the street. And so we go back and forth, and we end up saying, like, somebody will say, okay, so you're trying to make sure that my prospective employer can't hire me part-time. I've got bigger things to worry about than being protected from people who want to offer me jobs. Will you please just get out of the way? So it just makes the point without the theory.
If I can intervene on this point. So one thing I can definitely offer, and with Rosa Maria and Saura, we've already talked about this, is that the reason we are able to actually complete this video series this year is that we have our own production facilities to do these animated videos now. It took a long time. We've been gathering things, equipment and resources and know-how to be able to get to this point. But, this goes for anybody, for the Italian version ones, if, Admir and Stefano need help with something, we can provide some help with that, provided that there is a bit of money, not a lot, available to pay the people who are actually doing the, pushing the buttons and doing stuff. And the second thing I wanted to say was, one other thing that we noticed was that in communicating these ideas, the kind of way of saying things, just like Dave was saying now with the talk on the street, matters a lot. Which is why, at some point we were talking with someone else from the US about getting some of their animated videos and trying to replace the voices on those. But we tried that, and it doesn't really work very well, because when you start writing stuff for Romania, for instance, you notice that there are all of these little language jokes and little things that people do in a very particular, they do or say things in very particular ways that are deeply cultural. So it actually made more sense for us to just say, we'll write the thing from the start to the finish for the Romanian audience, with Romanian examples, with quirky Romanian words that don't even translate well to other languages, so that the high school kids, they feel like, they're talking to one of their own. And Romanian is not even that bad. I mean, there's a lot of import from American culture. So, some of those things will work. But, if we talk about France, for instance, France is, in French, it's terrible unless you can put the lingo in there and the very extensive jargon that young people in France do tend to use. You're not going to get through to them. And I teach in French as well at the university in Bucharest. It's very hard for me sometimes to understand what some of the native French speakers I have as students are saying, because, the kind of French that they use sometimes, it takes a lot of my time to keep watching French movies all the time, just so I can try and keep up with the jargon. So that's why, it's great to have some resources to start from, but also if you're going to tackle content in native languages, sometimes it might make more sense to just do something that's from start to finish designed for that culture and language.
If I make you know, 3 quick points. One is regarding France again. It is true that the book Commercial Society and all you know, all that goes with it will probably be difficult to use at the high school level. But I'm not sure that there is such a gap between high school and all those programs that you know, high school students enter after high school. I think there are a lot of people teaching economics in business schools, in all kind of 2 years teaching, and those people, I think, will love using a book such as that one. And I think even though, you know, I mean, high school are doing a very poor job, and it means that there is really a second chance. I mean, you know, maybe the guy teaching you economics in high school was really bad, and usually they are very bad. Maybe you got just a couple of ideas, and it's true that, you know, that your mind might be shaped by what your high school teacher has been telling you, but I'm not sure it leaves such a deep you know, mark in the mind of the student. Of course, if that's the only thing they get, they just stay with it, you know, because no one else ever told them anything else. But if, let's say, in their short 2 years program after high school, they have a new, well-taught economic class, or business and economics, or business ethics and economics, that might have a good, a really strong impact on them. Maybe because they're getting closer also to start working, and maybe they will listen with another ear. So that was my first one. Very quickly, just reacting, I fully agree with everything that has been said about culture and the necessity to have videos which are in large part, you know, coming and designed by people from the same culture. What can be shared, I think, and that will sometimes help us to get our message through, are some videos from big guys. And those can be subtitles. Just to give you an example, with my law and economics student, master's student, I sometimes give them the link to Jimmy Wales' interview at Francesco Marroquin, where he said that he was very much inspired reading Hayek, The Use of Knowledge in Society. You know, so, you know, some of the students might say, okay, I heard for the first time about Hayek today, but you know, interesting is a guy from Wikipedia. He also read about Hayek, and he said that's very interesting stuff. So, you know, those kind of things could be shared, and that's where we could really, you know, thinking about what Rosa Maria was asking, you know, we could shot one good video, and then, you know, give copyright and possibility of people to translate it. If it's a big guy, like there might be a businessman, you know, like Jimmy Wales, or it might be someone working in finance that's safe for once intelligent things, you know, here and there that might happen. That was my second point. My third point, but that would open an whole debate. I think we've learned a lot through the coronavirus crisis. I think we should definitely do what our friends at IBL, who are always ahead of the other in Europe, that, you know, we should develop things online and things of that sort. But I really believe that, and that actually is my experience of the crisis, that we should mix the media, and we still need the necessity to meet. So, for instance, one of the things that you could follow things online and then organize an event where everyone will meet and finally, you know, see the guys for real.
Okay, Alberto. There is also a question from the public. Somebody asked, Mario Ivan Juarez Garcia asking, what's the plan to avoid centralized educations in Europe? And I think the first answer from Pierre gave a little bit of a point, looking behind just high school education. And now let's see Alberto's with this fake cat share to
cat.
challenge Dave's and mine.
That's a different sort of cat. So I just, you know, I was feeling lonely because everybody else had a cat.
And mine is named Hayek, and he joined us in the seminar. He also wanted to share his voice.
Well, certainly he knows that knowledge is dispersed. I just want to make a point on what Pierre said before. I think we don't do this kind of stuff for the A student. Today, the student who's doing well, who's curious, can very easily find sources online and get hold of literature and learn way better than he did in the past. I think we do this kind of stuff for the C student or the C minor students who's not particularly ideological. This is no longer the 1970s. But basically, because her own objective, her own goal in school is passing the test any given day, she repeats what she finds in her textbooks. And, you know, if you look at Italian textbooks for high school that are by and large not economics, but history textbooks, of course, you know, the sort of picture of the Industrial Revolution you get by the textbook is still the sort of picture you know, Friedrich Engels provided with the situation of the working class in England in 1845. So I think, you know, at least for our high school program, the goal is not really academic excellent student. The goal is just lots of people that actually are even more troubled by getting a wrong understanding of what a market is, because they are not going to be pursue a PhD in post-structural new analytic philosophy. They're going to be nurses or you know, plumbers or whatever. And they're going to be missing an understanding of the world they live in. I think Rosa Maria made a very good point before when she said that a key point in talking with high school students is making economics relevant to them. I had wonderful experiences in cooking schools, you know, with kids of 16 or 16 years old. Very short attention span, clearly. I mean, these guys are learning to cook and how to serve in a restaurant or in a hotel. But they can understand stuff if you try, you know, to bring ideas about complexity, the division of labor, and so on and so forth into their reals. Winemaking, you know, eye the pie instead of eye the pencil, and that sort of stuff. So I think this is a very important goal to keep in mind. I think the intellectual student has never been closer to our ideas, but he or she does not particularly need animated videos. I mean, it can just browse the internet and read and understand the use of knowledge in society. We need animated videos for people that totally legitimately have very little intellectual interest. And for them, this is a point Stefano was alluding to. We need stories. I mean, clearly the human brain is a story processor. It's not an information processor. Now, the point with that, quite sadly, is that most of us are quite bad in working on stories. It's not our job. I mean, we like playing with ideas. We're not particularly good at storytelling. But my 2 cents is always that when our movement will get bigger, we will eventually have also people that are good at storytelling. What we can do as teachers is using good stories. And, you know, from the movie Joy, to, you know, some pretty anti-libertarian movies or TV series, Snowpiercer and inequality, and explaining why the inequality problem is different in communities where you don't have any economic growth and in communities where you do have economic growth. And so making an Hayekian point that doesn't make much sense to use social justice in a modern capitalist economy. So we need to try to do that as much as we can. And Rosa Maria is really pro in teaching us how to do that. We have a question from Mario Ivan Juarez Garcia. I don't think we can avoid a centralized system of education with these devices. What we're trying to do with this sort of programs is taking advantage of educational freedom, which is, alas, by and large, the arbitrary freedom on the part of the teacher to interpret the curriculum in the way she sees fit. And clearly, I mean, when we talk about education systems, Europe is hardly ideal. I don't think there are many countries that allow for school choice in any meaningful sense. But the freedom to teach of the professor is sacred still. And so what we should try to do is teach with these people, provide them with good arguments, engage them, and try to be valuable to them. I mean, quite frankly, sometimes you do have example of teachers that are very intellectually honest, and they say, you know, I'm a Marxist. I know that when I'm teaching history, I'm still a Marxist. I want my students to have a glimpse of something different. So these are the kind of people we need to engage. I think, you know, if I need to sum it up, I think we need to use stories very well. We need also to keep actualizing our arguments, both in terms of making our arguments relevant for the daily life of the students, but also in terms of, you know, not going to class and speak only by providing universal argument as if reality outside class didn't exist. So in this regard, I fear that COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 war will be a very serious challenge, particularly for this kind of program, because we don't have the luxury of, you know, a scholarly debate, of making extremely complex argument, of showering people with data. We need to get to a point in a simple way in front of a non-intellectual audience and still be at the same time honest and relevant.
Thank you, Alberto. Stefano, you're still muted.
Yes. Yeah, hearing Alberto, first of all, while he was talking, I noticed a funny coincidence because he evoked the iPencil story and the possibility of extending it. And that is exactly the kind of 2 cents that thinking aloud, I feel like sharing with you. And it's also a question whether you think it's feasible to create a network with businesses and ask them or help them create iPencil style videos about their own products. And the benefit in doing this would be that there would be a large range of different videos about different products that cater to different type of audiences, all of which would make clearer, hopefully, one of the difficult ideas of our times, which is precisely the global value chains that are behind today's globalization. And I think it would be also extremely relevant in a time like the one we are living in, where due to COVID and political forces, globalization seems to recede. What I imagine is reaching out to any company that has a large, obviously, a large chain of connections and create complex products, and have them tell the story or help them tell the story of how that product is made, showing that pieces come from different parts of the world, different economic contexts, different types of laborers involved, etc. It's just, it's literally a 2 cents.
Yeah. I'm not sure it will work well because a lot of businesses now are doing the marketing all tutto italiano, all French or Romanian, but I think that definitely something.
Yes, if I may just interject, Stefano, there are actually a few videos on YouTube already. They're pretty good. So there is a guy, for example, that makes a sandwich from scratch, really from scratch, making his own bread, his own ham, and all.
That one I saw.
It's very effective. And there is another of a guy that tries to make a toaster from scratch. So there's a series of videos like that. I think they're very well done, particularly because the guy who made them is sort of humorous and funny. So he plays with them. And so he says, for example, making himself a sandwich from scratch costed him 6 months of his life. And of course, the sandwich he makes is okay. So 6 months of your life for an okay sandwich. It's a very good point. I think it's good. We actually asked a few years ago a company that makes pencils to make a video of how it makes pencil, but we never quite came to an agreement. Also, precisely because of the reason Rosa Maria mentioned, that I think, particularly with COVID-19, we've seen how even speaking about value chains is pretty meaningless. Everything is integrated with everything else. And when the Italian government tried to understand what was essential, the only reason why we kept having food arriving in our supermarkets is that they say, okay, well, you declare yourself, you're essential, and that's pretty much okay. So a very Italian way to problem solving, but much better than the alternative anyhow. But I think it would be wonderful to have some people doing that. I have actually one businessman that could do it because I think he likes the idea. But I cannot think of many really.
If I may, just two quick. First, I think I remember seeing a video from what's their name, Faber-Castell, the one who make pencil. I think this is their just regular video, and it's already beautiful in terms of showing, how complex in fact the pencil is, and so they pick up the colors and the powder, and it's so this I think is I don't know where I saw that, but I saw it somewhere. But I think, and this is linking to what Chris was saying, if you want to do a video like that, maybe the best thing would be indeed to go to the pizza place around the corner. Instead of trying to see something away from having almost a student, asking the question to the guy, and then where does that come from? And by the way, your truck, where was it made? I see it's a Toyota truck. And then, go on and on. Smith took the guy working on the port, to illustrate the complexity of things, and the little thing that was here, the little cod, the blue cod, in the Wealth of Nations. So, just the guy around the corner will probably talk more to the students, and then they will realize that this whole silly idea of having a made in Italy product, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I think, Pierre, there's a great amount of value for kids, particularly lower level, elementary school and so on and so forth, just to understand that milk doesn't come out of heavens. So that it requires effort and labor and so on and so forth. But I think that when Stefano and I were going to elementary school, we were exposed to that. I mean, we were typically brought to the Centrale del Latte, which is the milk factory. For some reason, I think it is something that Italian elementary schools stopped doing 10, 15 years ago.
Dave wants to. Okay, Dave and okay. Dave and then Christian. Dave, register. Dave, you there? I think it froze, so Christian, you took your spot by force.
So sorry about that. So three things I wanted to say. One, just to quickly address what Mario was saying as well. I don't think here in Romania we want to bypass the government control of the economics curriculum, because the government control of the economics curriculum is very strange. You know, it's not that the government has a very clear idea of the kind of economics it wants to teach in schools. It's not like there are any good manuals out there for economics. So basically, if we manage to come up with a good textbook, you know, a translation of the commercial society that is adapted to the needs of the local curriculum, and that looks better than any of the other options, and that's not hard, then you can get that authorized to be used in schools, and it's not going to be that complicated. And then you actually have a very large audience, a very large captive audience that the government can provide to you. So, you know, this is one of the ways we thought of doing this here because of the strange way of the workings of the Ministry of Education. Now, the second thing was about what Pierre said earlier. We actually did interviews with Romanian entrepreneurs as well. We have those ready again for September. So we managed to get 8 of these Romanian guys who started from nothing and then created, you know, very large businesses. You know, one of the largest chicken farms in the country, the largest courier delivery service in the country. So we, at some point 2 years ago, we found all of these guys in the same place having a conference, and we managed to get them to sit down and interview a bunch of them. We were very careful to also vet them so that there are no funny corruption, you know, Eastern Europe style complications associated to them, so that, you know, we do give some good examples to students. And that's why I think, you know, we don't know yet, but I think these videos will be very helpful in getting young people to be more interested in economics, because, you know, they want to know how do you get rich? You know, this is one of the big questions when you're a teenager. So, you know, if you can give these videos as well and put them there and say, you know, the economic stuff, the micro and macro stuff that you should know is connected to these guys who, you know, these guys know this stuff. That's why they're rich. Be a good motivator. Finally, the last one about the how it's made videos. We also had the idea that, you know, we would try to sell these video production services to companies, you know, to say, we'll come to your factory and film how you do things to make this little promotional video that we will then include in our economics teaching website. Please give us some money that will pay for this promotional video so that we can use some of that money to finance the education side of things as well. It hasn't yielded any results yet, but we will keep trying. And I mean, I'll let you know if it does work at some point.
Okay, thanks. Well, a closing thought then. There was a question on the chat board from someone anonymous asking how we think what we think is the best way to teach economics and to get students interested in economics. And I think it's there's different answers. There's more than one answer, and there's different ages when that's relevant too. So at one stage, it might be that. Say what Christian was talking about, it's like taking them on a tour of a bakery or taking them on a tour of a farm and having somebody explain what it takes to make a living in this business. And sometimes it goes in that direction, sometimes it doesn't, where people would say, now imagine a guy in Washington who anticipates, or whatever, a central planner who anticipates that you're going to need plastic to wrap that. No, it's not going to happen. But I think at the high school level, what I've seen in the high school level, it's nothing like movies that they make of high schools where everybody's got a gun. It's everybody's showing up, they're eager and they're morally engaged, and they want to live a good life. So I think at a certain age, you got to make it a moral challenge. So you ask them whether they want the world to be better.
Sorry.
you want to ask them whether they want the world to be better off with them than without them. And like you say, when you're done with this life, do you want to know that it was good that you were here? Do you want your children to know that it was good that you were here? So, and that has consequences. If you don't understand what credit cards are or what a mortgage is, you won't be able to take care of your family. If you don't understand cash flow, you won't be able to run a business. You won't be able to take care of your employees. And at a policy level, that's not as important actually, even though we spend more time on it. But still, if you don't understand who are the winners and losers when you raise the minimum wage or when you increase immigration restrictions, if you don't understand that, you'll be like that basketball player who ruined his life by taking a bribe because he couldn't see what the next logical thing in the sequence was. So you've got to be able to see things coming. So you've got to understand economic logic. You've got to understand that even the experts don't know what's around the corner. And so your plans have to take into account how things are not going to go according to plan. And if you don't have that level of depth and maturity in your thinking, the people you care about won't be able to depend on you. So I think that's a way of, at a high school level, that's what they need to hear. That's what they want to hear.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a wonderful way of closing up this argument. Just before leaving, I want to thank one person, which is not seen in Bastia term, but she brought us all together. So Saura Masconale, the outreach director of the Freedom Center, who put us all together and is championing this our initiative to work together toward better economic education and spreading the ideas of commercial society. So thank you, everybody, for being a little piece of this iPencil, commercial society project. And thank you for having been part of this seminar. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Very
you.
good
Bye.
seeing all of you.
So much.
Hope to see you
Bye.
soon.